Hey, praise the Lord, guys. I'm Shaw Greenhorn. And in the morning, as they passed by, behold, they saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. Now Peter called to remember, saying, Master, behold, the fig tree which thou cursest is withered away. Jesus answered and said unto them, Have faith in God. For verily I say unto you, whosoever shall say unto this mountain, Be ye removed and cast into the sea, shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that whatsoever he said shall come to pass. He shall have whatsoever he saith. Therefore I say unto you, when ye pray, whatsoever things ye desire, believe that you receive them, and ye shall have them. Okay, so here's a lesson that teaches many things. We know this one all too well, cursing up the fig tree. So we just saw where he came riding in town on the donkey, them strewing the palm branches in the way and their clothes, saying, Glory to God in the highest. Now we saw where he entered the temple first, but then he marveled, then he left and went on to Bethany. Coming from Bethany, he was an hungered. It didn't really say what he did. We're still in Mark. But he was an hungered coming from Bethany after having rode into town on the donkey, entering into the temple. So then when he saw nothing thereon but leaves, expecting figs, we said in maybe two lessons ago that the figs are a fruit that they you see the by the time the leaves make it there, that means the figs should already be there. That scripture even says it wasn't even time for the figs. So then, why were the figs putting forth leaves? Trying to, broadcast something that you're not, trying to, convince people of something that you're not. But the fruits they will be there or they won't. We know a lot of people in this life, they have the gift of gab. They're able to convince people of a whole bunch of things. And this is where we get the con men from. Con men actually means confidence man, because they are so sure of the thing that they're trying to convince you of. They believe it so much, and they're able to articulate with words, so much to convince you that they are not only right, but they're experts, and that you have no way of losing if you go with them. But we've seen too many Bernie Madoffs, too many Enrons. This fig tree was trying to profess something that it wasn't. Pretty much. So Jesus, when he saw it, he said, no man eat fruit from thee henceforth, forever. So then, after that, that's when he went into the temple and began to cast out those that bought and sold in the temples, overturning the money changers' tables and the seats of them that sold doves, saying that, Behold, it is written, My house shall be called of all nations a house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves. Then it's after entering the temple this second time, but the first time he just marveled. Like I said, remembering that there shall not be left one stone upon another which shall not be thrown down. Even seeing his own crucifixion just a matter of what, days away. So now it was noted that the disciples heard when he said this, when he said, No man eat fruit from thee ever again. So here we are passing by the same way. So now the disciples can see this manifested, this spoken word be manifested. And like I said, this is a lesson in many things. It's a lesson in faith, believing even the things that you might think to be impossible. Whoever thought that saying words could cause a tree to be withered up and dried up by the roots, like this. Power of the spoken word, power of faith. That's the positive message for the believer. What's the negative message? Like I said, don't go around professing something that you're not. The Bible, it does say, Thou shalt not lie. But when we think of lies, we think of, I really am drawing a blank. But I can tell you what we don't think of. We don't think of people trying to convince people that they're something that they're not. I was watching a TV show, and these parents, they had their daughter. She was getting to that age where, she was, getting, curious, about, physical intercourse. And, some rumors got started. And the kids, they were picking on her, calling her, promiscuous, the bad words. Those all too well. And it got so bad they had to move her to a different school. But then when she got to the same school, the same thing happened, and she went around professing that she was, super experienced and she knew a lot. And she actually got popularity, for this. The same exact situation causing, shame in one location and being praised for in the next. When none of these things were true. As youngsters, they struggle to fit in. And you'll be surprised of some of the things that they come up with, to maintain a position in the social order, in the grand scheme of things with their friends and their peers. How does this look like? What does this look like in the faith? People convincing others that they're something that they're not. People convincing others that they're more advanced spiritually than they are. Convincing others they know more than they know. People convincing others that they've been, to higher places than they care to admit. People convincing others that they're walking a certain way when they are not. We see people form cliques, people form groups, not understanding that we're one body of believers, and Jesus is Lord. And it's not us for us to play politics. It's not for us to position ourselves and step on others to gain momentum, step on others to get where we're going. But just like he told the disciples, when they said, grant that we may sit one on thy left and the other on thy right. You know not what you ask. Can you drink the cup that I should drink of, or be baptized with the baptism that I should be baptized with? But he said, "No, whosoever desires to be great, let him be least and servant of all." So we usually see this kind of mindset when those that come to the church, we hear the words, but we don't internalize it. We don't know. We don't make the connection. We don't put the rubber to the road, so to speak. Because, we know how things work in the world. Even Jesus himself said it, that that those which are accounted to rule in the Gentiles, they exercise lordship over them. And those that are great, are called benefactors. Basically saying that, in the world, those that are great, they rule, over those that are beneath them. They have their authority, just like the soldier that had his servant sick. What did he say to Jesus? I'm a man of authority, having soldiers under me. If I say to this one, go, he goeth. If I say to this one, come, he cometh. If I say to this one, do this, then he does it. That is the model of authority that we have come to know, and have come to know all too well. But as believers, we come, to the house of God, and we hear that it shall not be so among you, but whosoever shall be, greatest, let him be your minister, and whosoever shall be chiefest, let him be servant of all. So we hear this, and we hear it in our ears, but putting it into practice. I've been places where I see, we know this scripture, we know the saying, and we know what it means. But somehow we always find a way to fall back and to latch onto what the Gentiles do, as Jesus, to quote, Jesus himself, princes of the Gentiles, how they exercise lordship, how they exercise dominion, more from a sense of ruling than from a sense of serving. I'm saying all this to say, this fig tree, it was professing to be something that is not. And anyone professing to be something that they're not, I guarantee you they're not walking according to the principles, of what Jesus taught. So if you have somebody professing to be something that they're not, I guarantee you they're not looking to serve. I guarantee you they're not looking to be the least, to be everyone's minister, but they themselves are looking to be served. And that's why they fight so hard for the position, because they know, what's possible. I always say that people know what's possible when they, to be under a bad leader, to be under a selfish, egotistical, narcissistical, leader, and how, these people can really drive people to stress. So, when he came to the fig tree, there was leaves on it, but no fruit. What is that? Like I said, what does that look like? First of all, the fruits are the fruits of the Spirit: kindness, gentleness, meekness, temperance, long suffering, love, faith, humility. So it had the leaves. In the world of the fig tree, the fruit come before the leaves. So by the time the leaves got there, we were expecting all fruit to be there. Now I ask this question, because I'm always looking at all angles. What if somebody had came and they took all the figs? What if somebody actually beat Jesus to the figs? The Bible, it knows all things, right? And nothing is by accident. And if that was the case, I'm pretty sure it would have been mentioned, because it knows these kind of things. But I'm just putting it out there that could that not also be a possibility. In Jamaica, where I'm from, we often have mango trees, growing just out in the open, not in anybody's backyard. And when these mangoes come on the tree, hey, it's who gets it first. First come, first serve. As a matter of fact, it might be first come, only serve, because he might take all of them. So we see this fig tree professing to be something that is not. But then when Jesus looked, there's no fruit. We see people, being, so puffed up, so arrogant, so proud. People they wanted to be the leader of everyone while wanting to listen to no one. And that brings the Lord's his eyes close to you. And then when he looks, he said, look at this one. Look at how they behave. They're so, boisterous. They're so, visible, which I'm sure these leaves were. But then when I look, the things that I'm supposed to be seeing, the things that I work, because remember, it's Jesus. He's the potter, we are the clay. And it's him that molds us. And what do you think he's molding us into? The fruits of the Spirit. Kindness, joy, peace, temperance, long suffering, humility, faithfulness. And when he comes and he sees none of these fruits, he's gonna say, wait, something's wrong. This one is behaving as if, all these things should be there, but then when I get there, there's nothing. And I guarantee you there's nothing more than that that's gonna cause him to curse. If anything's gonna be cursed, it's gonna be because of that. Like, how dare you, show yourself to be something so great. You might even be stepping on others. You might even be, seizing force, literally seizing force, like how they overthrow governments in third world countries. So we see, the aftermath, them walking by and seeing this fig tree, withered up. Peter was the one that said something about it. Master, behold, the fig tree that thou curses is withered away. I'm pretty sure they were all marveling at this point. I've been around friends who are not even believers, and they'll say certain things, and then it happens. It's the power of the spoken word. That's why the Bible says that on the day of judgment, that we shall give an account for every idle word spoken. What if every word spoken created a fig tree or it destroyed one. While you were saying things, just not carelessly. Carelessly is a bad word, but you were out saying things, not taking heed to what you were saying. And what if these words they manifested and they all of them they produce something somewhere? Bible says we shall give an account for every word spoken. So Peter pointed it out. Master, behold, we know that they were already marveling at Jesus for all the things he did. We just saw him walk on water, calming the sea, when the boat was filled with water. What manner of man is this that even the winds and the seas obey him? The legion into the swine. We just saw him do some really great things. So they're always on the lookout for see what is he gonna do next. So when they saw this, they marveled. Say how quick is the tree withered away? We know that they knew that he was, the Christ, the son of David. But we know that this was done as a lesson to them. Because like I said, they heard when he cursed the fig tree, no man eat, fruit of thee henceforth forever. He pointed it out that they heard, this saying. So master, look at your power. You cursed this fig tree and it withered away. We've seen you speak to the weather and calm the seas. We've seen you cast out devils. Jesus, he quickly, steered this conversation into something useful because them seeing this example of cursing something, how one can only imagine how much of a tangent they would have gone on with curses, imagining all the things that they can curse. We already saw when was it the scribes and Pharisees that came onto them? I don't remember. And the disciples answer was, Master, should we command fire to come down from heaven like Elijah did? And he said, "You know not what manner of spirit you are, for the Son of Man is not come to destroy men's lives, but to save it." We already see how, they always miss the meaning of everything. And they always find themselves, in somewhere that's less than what he was expecting them to be. Like way less than he was expecting them to be. When he said unto them, "Beware of the leaven of the scribes and the Pharisees." Speaking of hypocrisy, they were there questioning about bread, like we forgot to take bread. That's why he's talking about leaven. When he had to explain the parable twice to them about, it's not what goeth into the man that defile him, but what cometh out. He had to actually explain that twice, and he really did almost lose his, cool on them. So he steers the conversation in a way that's useful. Have faith in God. Letting them see the beauty and the positive power and not the negative power from what he just did. Because it seems as if they have such a tendency to gravitate towards the lesser honorable, the lesser side of things. So you reframe it, have faith in God. Have faith in the beauty of God. Have faith in the honor of God. Have faith in a building and uplifting as is God's will. Have faith in being a good steward. Faith in walking honorable, walking peacefully with men. Have faith in building up and not tearing down. When he said, have faith in God, because he saw where it was going, because, as men, especially as males, when I say as men, I mean as humans, but then especially as males, it's us that do these world wars, right? It's us that have the power to end famine. It's usually us, the males, that are causing these things. Seeking power by any means. Getting power and then turn into corruption. So it's like when you get this power and you're head of government over so many things, then you take back doors, you do side deals where you get paid. The country gets hurt, the resources get just consumed. People suffer. Just so you get your pockets increase. At the end of the day, you're the only one that benefited from all this turmoil. So, have faith in God. Understand that we do nothing of our own accord. This statement, have faith in God, if we could just sit with this for a while, have faith in God. There's so many things that he's trying to communicate to them in this moment. It's like an open blank check. And he's trying to remove, all the negative stuff off, which is what they are going to gravitate to, right? Remember that everything that we do is because, of the Father. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, me, Jesus, that's speaking. Verily I say unto you, if you have faith and say unto this mountain, be ye removed and cast into the sea, shall not doubt, it shall be done. You're looking at this little fig tree, but he's shifting it away from the tree. Mountains. In the faith, we often associate mountains with problems, huge problems, and giants. Mountains and giants, things that need to be moved out of our way. Things, roadblocks. The Bible says what? That he opens doors no man can close. He closed doors that no man can open. But these giants and these mountains, we understand that they come, not from him, but from the enemy, from the kingdom of darkness, to stop, believers from, getting to where they need to get to, from accomplishing what they need to accomplish, from moving freely. The devil, he serves to sabotage, to kill, steal, and destroy. And, you ever heard the saying that, the greater the destiny, the greater the battles. To whom much is given, much is required, much is tested. Some of these mountains, they come to stop us. So Jesus, he's trying to make connection. He's trying to jump from the negative aspect of cursing this fig tree, to redirect. Hey, there's something more useful that you could use this for. Then you see whatever problems that might come your way, whatever roadblocks, say to this mountain be removed. What is a fig tree compared to a mountain? So Jesus, he really is trying to salvage, this conversation, because we've seen these disciples run off on tangents. They're already arguing who gets to be the greatest. I know them holding on to this negative, worldview, power, like I said, the Gentiles exercising lordship and dominion over those that are beneath them, rather than being chief and servant and minister serving. So now we have a super powerful person with the power to curse things and to destroy things with their word. I challenge anyone to tell me that this is not the current, world, view of things. Powerful men with power, what do? They destroy things, right? That just goes back to us being little boys when we like to, put magnifying glass, to cause fire, to burn ants. When we put firecrackers, we tie them to little insects and bugs and blow them up. He also said, therefore I say unto you, whatsoever things you desire when you pray, believe you shall receive them and you shall have them. Now, believing, I've seen so many people, dance with this word, and it left me. Maybe another person can speak for themselves, but it always leaves me in a negative place. Believing. What is believing? I see people, speak favorably about themselves, while they might be the biggest culprits of misinterpreting what this word means. What I've seen people think believing means is when they stand in one place and they believe really hard. Yes, I believe. I believe that believing, is such a complex thing. It's not just one thing. Believing is not just one thing as how they try to make it seem. You believing in your mind. I can prove this. What does the Bible say? By these signs you shall know them that believe. These are the signs. You believe? What are the signs? By these signs you shall know them that believe. It's not by standing in one place, focusing and concentrating really hard. Because I tried that. Nothing worked. Nothing worked until I started doing what the signs were. By these signs you shall know them that believe. In my name. They shall cast out devils. Are you casting out devils? In my name, they shall lay hands on the sick, they shall recover. Praying for people. They shall speak with new tongues. Handling serpents and drinking, poison or eating poison and surviving is not something that we go out intending to do, but it's more rather a reaction to something done against us. Serpents biting you, or somebody trying to poison you, to harm or to hurt you. First three are, casting out devils, laying hands on the sick, speaking with tongues. And I really believe that there's one more. There's one more that's missing. Takes care of the poor and needy. Those in need. You say you believe. I once heard the Lord give me a prophecy, against those that they're so quick to walk past those in need, the poor and needy, the homeless. He said that you guys sit there, waiting, thinking that you're on the top of my list. But the heart that you have, you're not ready for my list. And it had exactly to do with this. Are you the kind, can you pay for a $40 meal for somebody that's homeless and leave them to eat it while you just go your way? Are you the kind that can pay for a $40 meal for a homeless person you don't know and leave them and say, God bless you, and just leave? I see the homeless come to people, ask them for stuff. They find it so hard to give them $1. I say, imagine in the luck. They probably been there begging all day, and it took them hours to get that $1. How many more hours they gonna take to get another? You need at least $10 to eat something, right? So how many hours is that gonna take? I see people standing saying that they believe, and even looking at them, I want to say, you say you believe, but in what? What is it that you think you believe in? Because if I, by observing you, if I was to tell you what you believe in, you'd be so heartbroken. We have too many people that believe in the haves and the have-nots. You have, so I'll give you, high respect. But you have not, so you don't get no respect. You get no consideration. You don't even get a say in anything. I'm gonna tell you what you believe. That's how much I look down on you. I'm gonna tell you what you believe. I don't care to hear what you think you believe. Egotistical. People. What does the Bible say? By these signs, are you casting out devils? Probably not. Laying hands on the sick. Everybody brags about speaking in tongues and add, giving to the poor and needy. How is your heart when it comes to them? Can they ask you for anything? When you see them, do you cross over the other side of the street, like the Good Samaritan parable, where the priest and the Levite, when they saw the man, there laying, they crossed over to the other side. But then, you want to stand up and say, oh, you have no faith, you don't believe. And I've seen that way too many times, man, and that gets me more upset than anything else. Because, I notice that the people that love to say this, when I look at them, Hey man, they're some of the most unfriendliest people you ever meet. Why is it always like that? Because when you have that mic and you're speaking on the pulpit, you can say whatever you want, man. And you have the amplification of the speakers. Nobody can, power your words right then and there. So you go up, and just like this fig tree, showing leaves as if you have all these fruits. But I really did struggle and wrestle with this for such a long time. How do you know those that believe? You know what my first answer is? How are you with the poor and needy? Somebody comes to you asking for $5 for something to eat. What's your response? As a matter of fact, let me not ask you what's your response. What was the last person that came to you asking you for help to something to eat? What did you say to them? What did you think? 'Cause that's the heart of the believer. Like I said, the Lord said He's passing over many people. We have all these people saying that I believe, I believe, I believe. Casting out devils. Speaking in tongues and praying for people that need healing. That's easy. Those two are easy, I believe. Casting out devils and ministering unto the sick. This is what the apostles did all day, right? Disciples, this is what they did all day, right? So how is it that you do none of these things? Or you're missing so many of them, or you're missing the most important ones, but then you believe. No, the problem is that when you have that mic in your hand, you say whatever you want. All right, so let's get into these scriptures. It starts out saying, and on the morrow, as they passed by, behold, they saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. So this is the morrow, after, casting them out of the temple that bought and sold, overturning the money changers' table and the seat of them that sold doves. Behold, it's written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. So they saw the fig tree dried up. So this is the continuation of him cursing that fig tree. It didn't dry up right away. They saw it the next day. So this thing, it had dried up from the roots. It could have, the top part could have withered, but then, give it some time, it would have maybe, grown back and replaced, the withered parts, or it could have just perished. Anybody's guess, as to what could have happened. But this thing, it was from the roots. And there's a lesson to be learned here in, things that need to be cast out of a person. Not just demons, but habits, strongholds. Weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. That these things, they gotta, get pulled up by the roots. Just as how Jesus cursed the fig tree here. But then, like I said, there's also a warning. Be careful that you are not the one that's the problem that needs to be, uprooted by the roots. So it's understood that this word, it penetrated deep, down to the deepest parts. The word of God is quick and powerful, sharper than any two-edged sword, dividing asunder, both soul and spirit, down to the bones, joints, and marrows, all the way down to the bones, joints, and marrows. And the word that He spoke, it was so specific. No man eat fruit from thee henceforth. Now two things could have happened. This, which is, it withered up, so it died. There was nothing left. Or it could have lived, but just no more figs forever and ever. Like just living without producing anything. This just shows you when you come, onto the Lord, that He fixes you from the inside out. He fixes you from the roots all the way to the top. He cursed this tree from the roots to the top. He knows how to get, bad habits out of you. He knows how to get you from point A to point B to where you need to get. He knows how to build and instill in you the things that are necessary for your, spiritual walk. I know sometimes when we come, like this product and the end product is so different that we even question, is it even possible? Is it even possible for me? He just told them that with men this is impossible, but not with God, for with God all things are possible. So then the next one says, Peter, bringing to remembrance, said, Master, behold, the fig tree which thou cursest is withered away. So Peter was the one to point it out, at least verbally. It doesn't say if he was the one to first see it, but he was the one to say something about it. He was kind of like their spokesperson. He was the leader. Master, behold, showing him that this is the effect of what your words caused. Jesus, He didn't go around showing them. Sometimes we like to toot our own horn. There's a saying in America, self-praise and self-recognition, but they were the ones that pointed it out to him. So not making him seem like a try hard or a people pleaser or eager to please or eager to have something said about him. We have so many people that when you look at them, you see that they just like when people talk about them. And they just like to be the topic of discussion. They like to be seen. They like to be heard. And if they ever go a place where they're not, the center of attention, it causes so much problems in their mind, in their heart. Unable to be humble and just operate low key and in the background. Jesus. After we see Him as a child, reasoning in the temple when He was lost from His parents, when they went up to be taxed, we didn't really see anything from Him until the wedding where He turned the water into wine. We have ministers saying that Jesus lived His life, out of God's will up until that point. No, it wasn't His time. What does the Bible say? The heir, as long as he is a child different not from a servant, though he be Lord of all, but is under governors and tutors until the time appointed of the Father. It wasn't his time. Some of us were so, reactionary that we think that if we're not up in somebody's face, then we're not a believer. It's like we think that I can't help but say just reactionary, just reacting. And we can't, be low key. We can't be who we are without other people knowing that we are what we claim to be. It would be like a car. Instead of just sitting there waiting for you to drive it, the car would be there sitting, telling everyone, hey, I'm a car. Hey, I can go 100 miles an hour, 0 to 60 in 2. Hey, I have bucket seats. Hey, I have seat warmers. Hey, it would be the car just bragging all day. Just so people know that what it is able to do. Some believers, they're like that. And that's where we see, the protests online where they show the videos where you have the gays on one side, the Christians on the other, screaming out, you're going to hell and all these things. Some of us, we don't believe that we can be effective, in times of war. They'll send, many troops, one place, but then, they have, like the 007s, the James Bond, where they just send one guy and he goes in the midst of everyone and gets the job done. You would never even know he was there. So then the next one says, and Jesus answered and said unto them, have faith in God. And I believe he was saying this, to let your words go through God. He spake directly onto the fig tree and then, it withered away. But he was saying, let God, relay what needs to be relayed. Make your petition known unto him. Let God, be the one to decide what is done. Whatever circumstances, let him be the one to decide. Have faith in God. Pray to God. Let him know your heart. Let him know how it's affecting you. Let him know what you would like to be done. Let him know, but go through God. Jesus himself, he was, God. He is the Son of God. So like I said, reframe this moment. Have faith in God. For, in him we live, in him we move, in him we have our being. So the next one says, whosoever shall say unto this mountain, be removed and cast into the sea, not doubting anything, not doubting in his heart, but shall believe that the thing which he said shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he asked. So praying without doubt. So then, there goes the answer, the opposite to believing. As like I was saying, the way I see people believe is that they'll stand in one place and they'll focus and concentrate and say, I believe. Well, here's the opposite of that, doubting, not believing it's possible, replaying it over and over again in your mind, stressing out about it. Really, when we do that, we take things into our own hands, is what we do, instead of leaving it in God's hands. When you stress out about it, about how it's going to be done, the details. So believing you shall receive it. So then, can you see that there's two avenues of belief being shown here? The first one is, like I said, by these signs you shall know them that believe. You see, those that believe, these are the things that they will be doing. Those that believe and those that are operating on their faith, casting out devils, laying hands on the sick, speaking with tongues, serpents and poison, giving to the poor, helping the poor. But then we have this one, the belief where it's without doubt. Believing without doubt in your heart. No, if you ask me, the first one is better, and that's the one you should aim for, doing these things. Because there's no way that you're going to be in need of something, walking this path that God is not going to just like, wow, this is my servant, he needs something, or she needs something, and he's just going to make it happen. You're going to have so much good credit, with God, with him. He's going to make things happen for you, as opposed to, not doing these things and then, standing, believing, not doubting, believing with all your heart in your mind and focusing, asking for something, when you don't have any credit with him. I believe it's going to be harder in that instance. I've had, God do things for me, walking in these things that you can't believe, the urgency with things get done for you, doing these things, especially the poor, because I know that not everybody is going to have a ministry to lay hands on the sick or to cast out devils. It's easy to speak in tongues in church, giving to the poor. That's something you can control. Alright, so the last one says, therefore I say unto you, whatsoever things you desire when you pray, believe that you receive them and you shall have them. So this is the believing as opposed to doubting, and not the believing. By these signs we shall that I am Straw Greenhorn.